Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you all for the time this morning. Um, this first slide contains our mission statement, our purpose: supporting inventors and commercializing innovations across the Texas A&M University system, and we mean that across the full Texas A&M University system. Last week I was in Kingsville and Corpus Christi. The week before that, Tarleton State. I mean, clearly we recognize that the significant majority of our work happens in College Station, but we are about supporting the entire system, and we are significantly a service organization. Inventors are our customers. We just sent out an inventor service survey yesterday to more than 400 people. That went out to everybody who submitted an invention disclosure to us within the previous 12 months. We know we will hear some opportunities to improve, and that's exactly why we sent that out. We're not perfect, and we always aspire to improve with the goal of supporting, just as the statement here says. I have my next slide is a representation of our process, but rather than talk to this slide, I'm going to exit out of the slideshow and just take you to our website and show you where some of this information lives. So if you ever want to find it, you don't have to go hunt for these slides. It's on our website. If you ever want to point anybody to this information, you can point them to our website. So I'm going to exit out of the slideshow, hopefully. And the way I go is I just go to Google, type in, you can see it's one of Texas A&M Innovation. At the top of every page is the easy button about how to submit a disclosure, an invention disclosure to our office. The primary purpose of our website is to inform and to be as in any way we can think about, be the easy button for people to access our office. Featured inventors, we're updating it every month. I wanted to just show you a couple things. That slide I showed you is our inventor process. This image is a slightly more simple version of what I had on my slide, but it's the same information. So speak about this for a moment. This is not meant to be a perfectly rigorous stage gate to suggest that you can never get to commercialization without going through every step here. It's meant to describe the journey that is typical of most projects. On the far left side there, you can see we have system-wide inventions. That's as wide of a funnel as I could make and fit it on a PowerPoint slide. It's probably a little inaccurate to have that color be only maroon. I've learned that the entire system doesn't align with the color maroon. Corpus Christi's colors are not maroon, but you get the point that that's meant to be inventions coming from every part of the system. The first step in engaging with us is submitting an invention disclosure. And if you were to think about the hit rate, the percent of projects that go from the far wide side to being commercialized, that percent, let's say it's 10%. And so throughout this process, we are doing assessments to identify the projects that we think have commercial potential, work with, we're partners with the inventors in this journey. When we identify challenges to commercialization, we identify those, we try to address those. If we're able to address those, we feed that back. If we're not, then we close the project. Ultimately, our work is leading to developing a plan of how we're going to commercialize the project. That plan would include what is our plan to protect intellectual property, what is our plan to do development, what is our plan to market the technology, what is the plan who are the right kinds of partners to commercialize. If there is not an existing partner, which is who we would license something to, then maybe the right plan is to form a new company to commercialize that technology. We employ today 26 people. We have openings to hire more. If you could imagine trying to do this work and manage the relationships and and all of our activity across the entirety of the Texas A&M system and the more than $1.2 billion a year of research, much of it that you guys support. That there's a lot of work to do. And so we're hiring more folks. We can never hire all the perspectives that we want to help us with this. And so that's where that brings in commercial advisory committees to help give us significantly market facing kinds of insights to help us shape plans about how we're going to commercialize technologies. Each of these boxes has some text over here to provide a very high level description of what's happening in each of those boxes. So invention disclosure has some text, every one of those. We're constantly updating information. So if you go through this and you have some questions, that could lead to us updating the information. Again, the purpose of this is to be a helpful resource. We are getting close to having a frequently asked questions page and have all of that kind of information also available on our website. Again, our only purpose is to provide support and service to our inventors. I just want to go back quickly to the disclosure page. So to submit a disclosure, something we launched just 2 weeks ago was the idea of submitting a concept. So if our invention disclosure is our disclosure document. So I use the Word document. So our document contains a lot of questions. I think it's 21 questions eventually. The point of this form is we're trying, inventors are the world authority on their technology. And so we try to get information from the world authority if they have the information. The point of this is not to say, if you can't complete, some question, provide us a list of the companies or contacts you believe might be interested in the technology or disclosure. If you can't complete question 11, that shouldn't lead to you not submitting the invention disclosure. So if you ever interface with somebody and they say that form is too long, it's meant to draw out the information that's available. If an inventor doesn't have that information, submit what they have, and we will work with them to draw out the rest. We'd heard back about the form being challenging at times, so we launched a concept submission, which is, we think, just about as bare bones as this can be, which is, tell us your name, give us your contact information, and describe the concept, which to us is, tell us what the unmet need is and what you have identified as a potential solution to that unmet need. That's it. You give us that, you hit submit, and we will follow up with the person about what that concept is, frequently leading to submitting an invention disclosure. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of this, but I just wanted to provide that overview. And again, this is all information that lives on our website. That's why, and I've done this live. These are not slides. I hope you get that. So I just go to Google myself. I could bookmark it. It's just easier for me to go find it through a search. That's our overview of what we do as an office. I'm now going to talk specifically the rest of my discussion here about our specific work related to review of sponsored research. We recognize that sponsored research is a very valuable way of contributing to intellectual property. And in fact, many sponsors are potential commercialization partners. We celebrate this. It's part of the work that we're mindful of. We understand that we don't cause it to happen, and but it's something we absolutely want to have happen as much as possible, as much as we can encourage. I underline the word partners because, and I'll talk more about that. That is our view, my view of the kinds of relationships that we'd like to see come out of sponsored research is the sponsor and our side think about each other as partners. And that's not true of every relationship. Some of these are more like a vendor, and we are reviewing agreements. I am personally reviewing. I am doing this myself so that we can provide service and I can be mindful, aware of what's going on for anything that's non-standard IP terms with Office of General Counsel. My office, me and Office of OGC we are the process to provide our review and recommendations for approval that lead to the Vice Chancellor to approve. We have some exceptions that where non-standard IP does not need individual approval for the vice chancellor. Those are the existing exception is for testing agreements, an agreement where the statement of work looks like testing. And we're also working on other exceptions. We're mindful that you guys are also in a service business, and so any delays in providing service are to be avoided. We align with that. We're doing our best, and so it doesn't mean that we recognize that some things can fall through the cracks, have fallen through the cracks. I'm sure there will still be some things that have the chance to fall through the cracks. We're working to eliminate any potential for things to fall through the cracks. Again, all with the goal of becoming good partners with our commercial, our sponsors. Talk a little bit about when I review the intellectual property terms, what am I looking for? First off is for the IP language, specifically the language about how is IP handled. To me, is the language fair? And so I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll talk a little bit more about it in the next couple slides. Does it provide appropriate IP rights to Texas A&M, and at the same time, does it provide language that gives a sponsor a reasonable opportunity to obtain the rights that they need to support their commercialization? Because and that is, to me, about what is being a good partner with our sponsors. This is high level, and we can talk more about the specifics of what is appropriate and what is reasonable. But this is the way I think about, is the IP language fair? And it varies per agreement. Depending on how, if the IP language raises some concerns, we then look at the statement of work. And is the work described in the statement of work likely to create IP with valuable commercial potential that can be challenging for any of us to do? It can be challenging, even more challenging for my office to do if we're not deeply aware of the project. But it's often possible to read the statement of work and say, the results, the potential IP that might come out of this work is not likely to the intellectual property itself is not likely to have significant commercial potential. So that, again, gets us into the category, we're okay to move it forward. We then can look at, is the statement of work highly prescriptive such that our role is simply to execute that statement of work? So this gets me back to testing and situations like this. It's a situation where our role in that partnership is really a vendor. The sponsor is clear what they want to happen. They've told us what they want us to do, and we do it. We're a vendor. The other types of relationship, other partnership, is where statement of work anticipates Texas A&M making intellectual contributions. This is where a development part. While vendor agreements are certainly fine, I think we desire to be treated more like partners in these collaborations, in these agreements. As I get involved, that's a part of my work is to, again, be fair, is about us getting treated like a vendor, and how are we or treated like a partner. I want to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the concept of fair market value. I capitalize this because fair market value is a legal thing. As a not-for-profit, we are obligated to receive fair market value in exchange for grant of IP rights. For actually anything of value that we provide as a not-for-profit, we're obligated to get fair market value for that. We're here just talking about IP rights. Most budgets that come from a statement of work are based on the personnel hours and equipment usage, so they do not include consideration for grant of IP rights. And this is not about being difficult, and this is just about, when I have conversations with a sponsor, if we're struggling to get to agreement, the observation of what's going on is, if the budget doesn't include some kind of consideration specifically for the grant of IP rights, it's a challenge for us to suggest we've received fair market value for granting those rights. The knock-on on this is we're talking about doing some development, and I think it's conceptually difficult to divine the value of IP that will be created in the future. And if this, again, it gets back to, if the statement of work is very prescriptive and precise, then you can, And those are situations where, again, our intellectual contributions will be limited and we can probably get to okay with that. But this is just going to be, we're going to work together to do some collaborative research and development. That IP will be created in the future, and when it's created, we will then be able to begin to understand the value. That's what leads us to our preferred approach, which is provide an option to negotiate for future IP rights. Those option terms include significant preferences to the sponsor, and even more, if we've developed a true partnership relationship with the sponsor, that partnership relationship should lead to additional preferences to the sponsor that may be difficult to write in the actual agreement, but in some of those relationship things are built on trust. But if we've worked with a sponsor and been collaborating with them for years, and we have some intellectual property that comes out of that relates to the work that has been developed together as for years, of course, by far our preferred commercialization partner for whatever our portion of the IP might be would be that sponsor. And we would capture much of that in the actual terms. But when it comes to any kind of negotiation, that would be exactly who we start with. We have high priority to doing a deal with, and would work exactly in that direction, explicitly, exclusively for some time, and also preferentially because of the relationship we have from our partnership. But that often is built on trust over time, and again goes back to why we think about this as a partnership, because this is exactly how the results of sponsored research can get into commercialized projects. And so this is my last slide, other than my contact information. So I'm hopeful to have some questions. So I just wanted to put a few thoughts down about some guidance or PIs related to IP. We recognize that PIs often have close long-term relationships with their sponsors. That's exactly what we want. I mean, going back to the beginning, sponsors are often potential commercialization partners. Our PIs having relationships there is a significant step towards building that partnership kind of relationship. And so to me, this is exactly what we want. We'd like for PIs to remember who their employer is, but we need to develop relationships as part of building a partnership, and the PIs having that relationship is incredibly valuable. We do, depending on how things are structured, and if the IP terms if we end up needing to agree to IP terms that are not as favorable as we like, or not what we exactly would call fair, we'd like to make sure that the PIs are aware that there's the potential for IP rights to the sponsor leading to restricting research beyond the length of the sponsored research agreement. And again, going back to the fundamental why we exist. We exist to provide service to inventors across the Texas A&M system. Specific to sponsored research, what is a portion of our service is making sure we're protecting PIs from getting caught up in something that they're not intending. And I hear it and I see it in the email exchanges frequently that the PIs say, well, I don't care about the IP rights, or this is not likely to happen. I would respond to that. Be mindful of how important IP rights are to the sponsor. And you can, I think that's demonstrated by the priority that the sponsors put on negotiating the IP right language and the priority of that language in these agreements. I mean, it is highly important to the sponsors, which to me suggests that we should, our PIs, even if they're not, even if commercialization of their inventions is not a priority to them, they need to be aware that it is an important thing, and handled poorly can be a real problem for them down the road. And this last statement is really just about some of the logic of if we get pushed into a situation where the language is not exactly what we want. And this goes back to the idea of being a vendor versus a partner. if the statement of work suggests that we're a vendor, then we should not perform like a partner. If the statement of work is saying, here is what you're supposed to do, go do that, we should do that. And there's an element, to me, the follow-on of the logic there is, if we have done something that leads to creation of IP, then that probably is not part of that. It seems like that's not part of that statement of work and should not be included. Now, going back to the first bullet on this slide, I'm aware that PIs have relationships with sponsors, which can lead to them saying, well, these are my colleagues and I want to work closely with them, and so I want to give this to them, which is understandable. To go back to the fundamental of getting treated fairly, and what our job is trying to protect the PIs primarily, but also Texas A&M, is to get treated fairly. And so this last bullet is about, aligning how we think about things. If we're in a vendor agreement, then we should function like a vendor. Our preference is to be treated like a partner and as a co-development partner, where our intellectual contributions are encouraged and recognized. But we want to be careful about, and I think, and this is some of where our pushback is the sponsor wants to treat us like a vendor, but expects us to perform like a partner. So it's not about even executing the statement of work. Still requires experience and world-class expertise. It's just the difference between us intellectually adding our, some creative elements to how is this statement of work going to get executed. And so that's what I mean by prescriptive, is that the statement of work is very, very detailed about the steps. Truly, I talked about us being partners with our sponsors. Truly, I want to be partners with all of you that are doing important, great work. Anything I can do to be helpful, let me know. I've reviewed agreements that are in negotiation before they're ready. I think that's great. I was on a call, I think it was yesterday, with a PI who was trying to get in front of a negotiation with a sponsor. It was a fun conversation where the sponsor characterized the sponsor's attorney. I don't know if the sponsor was himself an attorney, or it was just the attorney for the sponsor, characterized the relationship like us being a bad boyfriend. And I took exception to that in the form of, I don't really start my partnerships assuming that the other side is going to be some version of a bad boyfriend. I think that's a lousy way to start a partnership. I know we need to be attentive to language and be wise about things. That's not the same as thinking the worst of the other side. And so, so we're really here to try to be part of helping figure out how to get these things done. And hopefully you all think of me and our office as your partners in getting this done. So thank you again for the opportunity.